Yeah,
It says
he left
upcoming.
because he saw the old language.
That one's the recorded one.
Yeah, it's telling me upcoming.
So how are we now? Hey everybody out there in TV land. Does it show anything? No, I'm recording right now. Do you want to see?
Yeah.
Is that
I think they're clicking on the wrong video.
is it okay now? No.
Still doing the rough.
The one that's live?
Well, I'm taking it.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, it's working. Okay.
All right. No, go ahead. You could take go use this one. All right, guys. We've been having technical issues, but we're gonna still get into the study, if that's all right. All right. All right. Smyrna. Basically, when we're going through, we're in Revelation chapter 2. We're on the second church. And then the parallels that we made, go back to the other studies, everybody, because on Smyrna, because what we're seeing here is the church that God is preparing for death. And so this is something we've just been talking about, actually. Wow, my father. And then his, seeing him when we went to California, we that was my last chance to say anything, right? And then his brother, he just found out about, hadn't seen him for, 9 years, you said?
2009.
2009,
Yeah, 2009.
right? 13 years. And then all of a sudden, his brother's passed away just recently. And, what do you come to find out is like, last words type thing. What are you going to do to prepare for that day? And that's all I care about. Like, either if I'm alive when Christ comes, you need to be prepared. If you die before Christ comes, you need to be prepared. And in fact, as you'll see when we get to the book of the church at Philadelphia, what does God do to prepare his people? He puts them through a real process of trial and testing so that they may have preparation for that day. And that's why he allows a lot of trial to go into people's lives, this type of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the study in Smyrna. So if you don't mind reading.
Me?
Yeah, or you're not comfortable reading? That's okay.
He's like, nah, I'm gonna read it.
Who would like to read the counsel to the church at Smyrna of chapter 2 of the book of Revelation? Anyone?
Which one?
8.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 2? And where does it say Smyrna? Is there a title?
Eight.
Verse 8? Yeah, go ahead. Rachel?
Persecuted church?
Yeah, that's it.
And to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, these things says the first and the last who was dead and came to life.
What's Smyrna right?
Was that?
What's that Smyrna right? What's that mean?
Oh, right. Like write something to that church. Like to that church, write this down.
Oh.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I know your works, tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. And I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Do not fear any of those things which you are about to suffer. Indeed, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison, and that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes shall not be hurt by the second death.
Now remember the 10 days thing? What is symbolic in the 10 days? You have 10 commandments. But what are some of the illustrations in the Bible that talk about 10 days? Daniel, the book of Daniel, right?
All the prophets went through like a 10-day tribulation.
Well, 10 days like Daniel, right? Daniel didn't he? Zach? Daniel went through a 10-day trial, didn't he?
Yeah, with eating vegetables.
And for what reason? He was under a death decree. And there was a vision that had to be understood. And then you had, of course, the 10 days of awe, which is the Feast of Trumpets, which is an examination of self before the Day of Atonement. So 10 is always a picture of God trying you by the law, testing you, getting you to measure yourself by the law of God, to see whether you are in the way of God or not, right? The commandments were likened unto a lamp or a light unto your feet. And that's why they had a blue tassel around the hem of the garments, because of the idea of walking within the 10 commandments, within the law of God, to walk in the light as he is in the light, that we may have fellowship with God. Because the 10 commandments is an expression of God's own nature, his own righteous heart. So if you want to know the God, Well, that's why every prophet always uplifted the 10 Commandments. No, this is the God, and this is how he expressed himself. This is a transcript of his own personality and character, the way he thinks. This is the thoughts and intent of his heart. This is how he runs his government, the 10 Commandments. So it's just a picture of the very innards of God. And then God tries you according to that. You want to know whether or not you are, quote, in the way or you are his child? He presents the 10 Commandments, and then you can examine yourself to see really if you're in the way. And the 10 Commandments go through things like no other gods. How you doing with that? I'm fine. I go to church and I accept Jesus. I have a bumper sticker and everything. As Mike/Steve laughs. And or I have a plastic Jesus on my dashboard. I have no other gods. But do you really? Is it the God and not is he the living God? The second commandment, no image, no idols. Well, I don't bow down to any statues. I'm not a statue bowing down type of dude. Really? But what images do you worship and bow down to in every sense of the word, right? Let's get a little deeper. I mean, is your life filled with image and ego? And are you worshiping people because of their image? What image is deeper than just a statue, a crying statue somewhere. So there's the third commandment. Don't take my name in vain. Last time I said GD was a whole 6 months. I'm fine. I don't take God's name in vain. But what does taking his name in vain mean, right? A whole day of meditating on this. You could take his name in vain in more ways than just saying GD, right? How do you take God's name in vain? What's a name in the Bible? A family name, right? What's your last name? Yeah, it's the person. So when, for example, what's the last name here that anyone wants to throw out? Turner. Well, the Turners don't do those things. The Turners are this way. We, the Turners, right? And this is how, it's how we, say this is how we're represented. And if you are bearing God's name, right? Alexander the Great, you ever hear the story of a young man who deserted? Alexander the Great, the young man that he was, right? Conquered the world by the time he was 25 years old. And then there was a guy who deserted. Do you know what Alexander did with deserters? Killed them. No mercy. And this young general, who was a general of Alexander's, said, listen, this kid, man, he was just scared. He's a good kid normally and stuff like that. Can you just give him one more chance? And he says, I don't. There was zero tolerance for desertion. And then so this general says, please just interview him, talk to him, just maybe, well, we'll see. They bring this kid, and he's examining this kid, and he seems like a good kid. He just had a moment of fear, a little shakiness, and he does not at all want it to get out that he's letting someone, get away with desertion. The kid walks away, so grateful. He says, by the way, kid, what's your name? The kid says, Alexander. Alexander gets off of his chair, runs to this kid, grabs him and holds him up and says, son, either change your life or change your name. You're bearing my name. To desert with the name Alexander? Wow, right? Can we bear his name in vain? Call ourselves Christians? How many Christians do you know that are clearly guilty of hypocrisy? Lots. In fact, that's the curse of the planet, is hypocrisy. Calling yourself a Christian and then turning everyone off to the idea of being Christians. We're only down to third commandment. It's already getting sweaty in here. And then the fourth commandment, the Sabbath, right? Do you keep the Sabbath? But even those who say they keep the Sabbath, do they really rest in God? Is God their rest? Is he your hiding place? Do you trust in him? Or are you saved by your works? Gets deeper. Same thing, honor thy father, thy mother. I had a terrible mom, a terrible dad. They should have never had kids. They should have never been in a relationship. Guess what? I had a good excuse to not honor them, but God says, I fathered you, I mothered you. I sent father figures in your life. Authority, that's appropriate. That cared for you. But you rebelled. You and your anti-authority stuff. You being rebellious and spiteful, even when people are fair to you, just because they're in a position of authority. You don't have a proper relationship with authority. That's why I joined the Navy, because I really didn't. I wanted to test myself. What about mothering, nurturing, solace, caregiving? How are you with that? I remember this one lady went to touch my head and I went like this, and she's all saying, "You don't receive affection very well. You must not have been mothered very well." True. Caught me. Right? Honor that God has sent. If they failed you, he will send other ways to father you and to mother you. Receive those things. Don't hold on to your pride saying, well, I was never taken care of. That's why I'm such a pest in this life. And I use my words very nicely. All right. Thou shalt not murder. Well, last time I've killed someone, I only have 2 dead hookers from the 80s. Right, Mike? He's like, yeah, I mean, what? No, right? I mean, we have this, thou shalt not murder, but what did Jesus say? Man, there's hate in your heart. That is equivalent to murder. Murder. Man, that rotten part of you that can't let anything go. That's what murder is based on.
Like if you had the chance, you would do it.
Yeah, I mean, I could think of probably 200 murders that I would have liked to have committed. Right, Zach? You believe me.
Also, they,
I was talking about you.
also, they don't work for the government now.
No, I'm obviously talking about myself. All right, what about this? What about, what else? It's not just murder. What's the next commandment? Anyone know? What about adultery?
It's the same.
Adultery isn't just, well, I didn't cheat on my wife.
Works the same.
But what did Jesus say? If in your heart, is there such thing as emotional affairs? Can I be faithful to Lord, but having an emotional affair? Is it just as grievous? Is it just as wrong?
What about lusting or, you know?
Yeah, desiring and lusting. In fact, that's going to be the 10th commandment, because we're going to find, as we start working our way down, the 10th commandment says, okay, if you think you got away with all, you checked out on all that, you seem to have your act together, don't covet. Don't desire anything that's not yours. Don't lust.
So, you know, like
You're like, oh man.
me having a daughter,
Yeah.
I saw, like, she'll walk by, I can see all the guys.
So yeah, and we only seem to see lust as that narrow bandwidth, but you're spending a whole day on lust. Let's start expanding the definition of lust now. Can you lust after what?
Money.
Food, money, fame, validation. It goes on and on and on. It's this endless, craven, rapacious desire for something, and you're never satisfied. You're never satisfied. You're never at rest. You're never at peace. And if anyone gets something, what about me? That should have been me. I should have had that. That's not fair. Lusting, right? Hey, it wasn't your lot. God says this is your lot. I have to wrestle with that all the time. You know, I'll see somebody put forward before me, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm qualified. I'm like, nope, doesn't matter. This guy had 2 seconds. He opened a paperback book from the dollar store. He's qualified. I'm like, but I've read volumes and spent my time. No, you sit on the bench, Dave. All my lusts come up, right? So these things. So what am I trying to really say is that tests you, and God prepares you for meeting him or for your death, your final period act. He sends the law, and he sends the Holy Spirit, and he sends that pointed sword, and he says, you've got to deal with this. We have to deal with this before you close the chapter in your life. We've got to deal with these things, right? We have to forgive. We have to learn to forgive, to be forgiven, to be naked, authentic, to not cover ourselves with our own kind of excuses, right? For preparation for death. Let's go to Matthew chapter 2, verses 9 through 11. Matthew chapter 2. The book of Matthew, the first book in the Gospels, second chapter, verses 9 through 11. And whoever wants to read.
Are you not reading tonight? Okay.
Go for it, Paige.
When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they opened their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
Is that interesting that these were the gifts for worship? The mother's name was Mary, myrrh, right? Jesus is surrounded by a mother, her, like literally Mary. Myrrh is her name. And myrrh, frankincense, and gold is very representational of things. Gold is faith tried in the fire. That's clear if I were to take you to a Bible study. Myrrh is the grieving, the more the bitterness that brings you down to deep kind of parts of yourself that normally we try to avoid. I don't want to know this about myself. You know how we could live in a kind of a denial state, right? That means you're Egyptian, right? You live in denial. Denial. But it's this sense of not facing yourself, right? Always surrounding yourself with false narratives, some way to somehow make yourself something that you are not. You guys know that people can do that, right? And do it a lot. Myrrh ends all of that nonsense, stops you dead in your tracks. And sometimes it takes a great tragedy or some bitter thing, or maybe being abandoned or being betrayed or whatever it is. It gets you down to that place that helps you to come to terms with things that you normally don't want to deal with. And what is frankincense? We won't dive into it, but we'll do it. The word frankincense is the word where you get Jacob went to Laban's house. You ever know the story in the Bible where Jacob went to Laban's house? The word Laban is frankincense, where it's the word for white, something that is a white stone that's thrown in a fire and all of a sudden sweet incense come up. It's interesting because you have to be over 11,000 feet to get to those trees, to cut that tree, to let it ooze its sap, and to get that to make frankincense out of. And that's an interesting study in itself. But when God wants to correct you, it's a picture of, let's go to Laban's house. You played some games, you got your prize through deception. Well, we're gonna take you through chastisement. We're going to spank you. You're going to go to Laban's house and he's going to do to you what you just did to your brother, right? And that's what the story of Laban's house, when Jacob had to go there and he repented. He changed. And God will put us through life circumstances to change us. All of that is worship. Worship. Is that interesting? All right, so let's go back to our readings. All right, let's go to John chapter 19. And what we're just going to show here, and Paige, if you don't mind, we'll start with verse 31, John 19:31, is you're going to see all this myrrh around the birth of Jesus and the death of Jesus. And then we're going to kind of our main part of our study is going to be when Mary walks into where Jesus was sitting in the room. And all of a sudden, Mary again, more myrrh surrounding Jesus. It's almost like smoke. Verse 31, John 19. Verse 31. And what you're going to see here is this Jesus surrounded himself in his whole life and death, burial, was surrounded by myrrh.
Please.
1567.
And what?
1567.
Oh, so you guys got the same Bibles. Well, that's good. So you can just give them the page number. 1567.
5.
And this is good because I want your eyeballs on these scriptures. This is all good stuff. So it's going to be John 19, and then look for verse 31.
You said 1567.
As under Jesus' side is pierced.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, John, and it's chapter 19. And then we'll start with verse 31. And yeah, what you're going to see, you guys, is that Jesus was called a man of sorrows.
31.
We'll start with verse 31. And what you're going to see is that Jesus surrounded himself with this Marys and with this myrrh and with mourning and with sorrow. Why? Was Jesus some kind of a weird masochist? Did he suffer from a melancholy, depressive state? What's interesting, we read in the last study that even Solomon says sorrow is preferred over laughter. Why? Remember that? Why is chapter 19?
Chapter 10?
19.
Oh, 120.
There you go.
21.
Right here. Then we're going to be starting right around verse 30.
Right under Jesus' side is pierced.
31 right here. That's where we're going to start. And so what's interesting is that why is sorrow in the Bible preferred? Even says in the book of James in our last study, why does God prefer that over laughter? You're thinking, well, God's not against joy. In fact, the joy of your salvation. God is all about the joy. But in this life, sometimes eat, drink, and be merry is what? Not good. And why do we sometimes use hilarity, laughter, all this stuff instead of sorrow? What is it sometimes? It's not just about happiness. A lot of times it's about what? Pain avoidance, escapism, right? Kind of self-intoxicating kind of stuff where you could whip yourself up into kind of this silly state. You know what's funny is my mom made this comment about me when I became a Christian. She says, I like you better when you weren't a Christian. You're a lot funnier. And I told my mom instantly, it wasn't a comeback. It was true what I said. I said, Mom, the reason why I constantly joked around is because I didn't want to deal with the pain of my life. I did not want to deal with my life, but now I am dealing with my life in a very real way. I'm not avoiding it anymore. That was real funny back then. In fact, that's how I lived my life. Endless amount of avoidance, joking. It was a weird anesthetizing. What's anesthetizing? It was a numbing effect to me. Nothing hurt me when I was joking. You can't touch me when I'm joking. No matter what my pain was, I made it funny. No matter how tragic the situation, even the military, I made it funny. Everyone says, man, this is inappropriate, but I'm laughing right now. This is probably the worst time to be laughing. And I would make everyone laugh at the weirdest, darkest time. Everyone liked me, right? Because I helped everyone to kind of not take it so serious. But for the first time, I felt safe enough to deal with things in my life, in my heart, right? So John chapter 19, verse 31, page, you want to read down to verse 42? Mm-hmm.
Therefore, because it was the preparation day, the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath. For that Sabbath was a high day. The Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. Then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the others who were crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and immediately blood and water came out. And he who has seen has testified, and his testimony is true. And he knows that he is telling the truth, so that you may believe.
Stop real quick. So right now he's all saying this is a legal reality. This is a testimony, so you might believe it, and that this testimony is true. John talks the same way in the book of 1 John. He opens up the book of 1 John with this legal language, saying there's a reason why they didn't break his legs, and there's a reason why they pierced his side, and there's a reason why blood and water came out. And Zach, what would be one of the reasons why blood and water came out? What's the picture of blood and water?
It's a sign of justification and sanctification, cleansing and representation.
And atonement, like God has paid the legal price. You know, the blood that cries out. Well, God is saying, well, it's atoned for. Your debt has been paid for through the blood. And the water is a picture of renewal, restoration, cleansing, washing, a change of heart, of mind, of disposition, of motives. So that was a sign. Go ahead, verse 36.
For these things were done that the scripture should be fulfilled. Not one of his bones shall be broken. And again, another scripture says, they shall look on him whom they pierced.
Now that's a quote from the Old Testament. We'll touch on that after she's done reading. Go ahead.
After this, Joseph of
Arimathea,
being a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might take away the body of Jesus. And Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took the body of Jesus. And Nicodemus,
very good.
who at first came to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes.
Myrrh and aloes, right? Go ahead.
About 100 pounds.
Wow.
Then they took the body of Jesus and bound it in strips of linen with the spices, as the custom of the Jews is to bury. Now in the place where he was crucified there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. So there they laid Jesus, because of the Jews' preparation day, for the tomb was nearby.
Wow. So it's interesting. He was buried in a garden. He had his last prayers that he was pleading with the Father in a garden. Why all this garden language? Goes back to the Garden of Eden, right? What was lost in the Garden of Eden, Christ went back through a lot of pain, a lot of sorrow, a lot of myrrh. You'll notice. and restored everything in a garden. It's interesting how he himself took that bitter root in the garden, bore that himself, only from his side, this picture of being birthed from the side, born of blood, born of water, which our friends, both Connor and Lindsay, will soon see blood and water as the child is born. It's a picture of being born. Remember, Eve came from the side, right? And it's this idea that we are born from his side. And it's just a picture that we are his companions. That's the picture here. We're born of blood, born of water, and he's done it in a garden. He's restored us when he drank a very bitter cup. Very bitter cup. So, Zach, do you want to read the book of Zechariah, chapter 12, verse 10? This is what they were quoting. Chapter 12, verse 10 of Zechariah.
And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look on me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn.
Okay, stop right there. I know you guys didn't get enough time to turn to it.
Well, I'll read it again.
Yeah, if you guys want to turn to it, it's the book of Zechariah, and it's a prophecy. And turn to Zechariah chapter 12.
Zechariah.
Here, I'll show you. It's in the
It's like in the middle.
yeah, it's in the Old Testament here, and it's part of the.
No, they're right there.
There it is. Yeah, you found it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Zechariah. Zechariah, go to chapter 12.
12.
And
Then I'm
then,
going to read another translation.
yeah, go to chapter 12 and then go to verse 10. And check this out. This is a prophecy, and it's very fascinating when you get into this prophecy, when you want to break it down. It's really quite the study. Go ahead, Zach. You want to read from a different translation?
Yeah, I'm reading Young's Literal Translation.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so it says, Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10. And I poured on the house of David and on the inhabitant of Jerusalem a spirit of grace and supplication. They have looked unto me whom they pierced, and they have mourned over it, like a mourning over the only son, or the only one. And they have been in bitterness for it, like a bitterness over the firstborn.
Yeah. So what's this bitterness? And it's Jesus Christ. It's a picture of him who's going to be pierced. And when we realize, why was he pierced? And you're going to see what's going to be very interesting when we get into this study a little deeper. Why was he pierced? He was pierced for my sins. He drank a bitter cup for that I should be drinking. If I'm standing before the court and I'm guilty of all these crimes. And what should be so sad about the whole thing is that, wait a minute, he's paying the price for me? He's up there taking my capital case, and he decided to enter into the death verdict for me. And you realize that this was the one that I've been fighting against, like Paul the Apostle. I've been kicking against the pricks, the goads. I've been fighting him, and this is the one who was pierced for me. This is the one. It's interesting when you get into the Hebrew here, it says that to look upon him, and it says Aleph Tau. And it's the beginning, the end. And you'll see it in the book of Revelation when Jesus Christ says, look, when they look upon me whom they have pierced, I am the beginning and I'm the end. It's like he's translating the Hebrew. I'm the beginning and the end. I'm the first and last. I am the one who created all things, made all things, who was, is, and will be. And I died for you. I was hung up and made a curse for you. And we should be saying, what is sin that is so terrible that it takes God himself to pay this price for me to stand before him? I thought if I just went around and fixed things up a little bit, that would do it. If I said sorry, that would be enough. Or if I said oops, or even better, I'm now a postmodern, my bad. My bad. Why is that not enough? Why does it take God himself having to come and to drink this cup, to pay the price, be pierced, for me to stand before him? And that should cause a deep sense of thought of going, what is this thing that is so terrible that this is what it takes for me to be called the Son of God in the house of God? It's pretty powerful stuff when you think about it, right? All right, guys, let's go ahead and let's get into Luke, well, no, I'm going to move past this. Now we're going to go into Mary and the alabaster box. This is the one where it says, this is a memorial wherever this gospel is preached. Don't forget to tell the story. So when somebody will ask me to come to their church and speak, I always usually start off with this sermon. It says, wherever the gospel is preached, anywhere in this world, this had better be told, this story. So I obey that. Because if you don't understand what we're just about to go through, you guys, you won't even understand the gospel. It's a memorial of this gospel. No doubt about it. So let's go to Matthew chapter 26. We're not going to study it exhaustively. We've got a few things to go over, but I really want to really touch on some key parts of this. Remember, this is in Bethany, which means house of the poor. Poor district. Jesus is hanging out with Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. They have an uncle who ended up with leprosy. An uncle that ended up with leprosy who happened to be a Pharisee, which was a part of very strict religious group. Very conservative, very strict. He catches leprosy. Now, what is leprosy a sign of in the eyes of a Jew? Remember, if you had leprosy, unclean, right? They would literally, you have to walk in and announce yourself as unclean. And what do they believe leprosy was a sign from God of? Remember, Miriam, Moses' sister, got leprosy. So what does leprosy represent? A secret sin that God is exposing you by giving you leprosy. He's showing the rest of the world, Simon has a secret, Simon has a secret, and he tried to hide it. Now he's got leprosy.
And for a
Pharisee, that's the worst possible thing. So Jesus heals him of leprosy and restores him back to the Pharisaical kind of good standing. And then he wants to have a dinner party for Jesus. So they had, lamb chops and chicken salad, and they had the whole thing, right? Big old feast. And he was so thankful for Jesus that he restored him to being a Pharisee, but there was some unfinished business in that house. So Martha and Lazarus were there cooking dinner, right? Lazarus just got resurrected a couple days ago. Everyone's curious to talk to Lazarus. So they're there making the meal in their uncle's house, but there's somebody missing. Who? Mary, right? Why is Mary missing? We talked about it. Something happened that chased her to a place called Magdala. She left there because some bad stuff happened in Uncle Simon's house. So much so that she took whatever happened there, and because I used to do documentaries, I did a documentary one time with San Francisco prostitutes. And I asked them about, well, what does it feel like to be objectified by men? And they're like, what? We have no power as women. Like, what? I have all the power. They pay me, and I'm in charge of everything. The reason I got into this is because I was so disempowered by sexual events that happened in my life that this is my way to get my power back. Not the answer I thought I was going to get. I thought they were victims. They said, no, I'm in charge. And if anything goes wrong, I got some gorilla waiting to pounce upon them, called a pimp, right? So they said, I have all the power. This is all about power. And it's all about what I agree to, what I don't agree to. Got my power back. I'll let you figure out Mary's situation. She's getting her power back. In fact, it's called Magdala. It means hair braider. It means that there is it's the idea of a tower. Migdal means a fortress. It's a way to fortify yourself, to be strong again. You can't hurt me. I'm in charge of the sexual exchange. That's how it is. Now Mary, 7 demons, following Jesus, wants to be rid of that kind of witchy power. She doesn't want the witchy power anymore. She doesn't want sexual power. She doesn't want any of it. But now she's vulnerable. And of all the places Jesus goes, she follows him everywhere. But of all the places he goes, he shows up at that house. The house she's been avoiding since she's gotten back. She probably feels like a little girl again, right? She probably feels horrified. And guess what's happening? There's a big party there. honoring Jesus by her uncle, who Jesus seems to have no problem with anymore, accepting the invitation to a party. I'm sure she was thinking, well, where's the payback? No payback. In fact, she watches Jesus walk into the house, and he doesn't even wash his feet. She's thinking, doesn't even wash his feet. How blessed are the feet of those who bring the glad tidings. Wherever Jesus walked, people were healed. The cries and tears and moans of pain are quieted. Jesus walks in there. Simon doesn't even wash his feet. This ingrate is not changed one bit. So Jesus takes the one. She got rid of everything of her life of prostitution, but there was one item she kept. What was it? A box of perfume. The price of 300 denarii. Denarii was a day's wage. 300 days of labor. She kept that. She saved it. For some strange reason, she goes and gets it, and she's going to bring it to the very house that was the beginning of the end of her childhood. So if anyone wants to read Matthew chapter 26, just read verse 7 and then verse 9 and verse 12. 7, 9, and 12 of Matthew 26.
A woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table.
Verse 9.
For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor.
Verse 12.
For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial.
Preparation for death. Smyrna. Prepare your heart. And all of a sudden, Mary, the word for mourning, the word for myrrh, now has an alabaster box filled with myrrh and ointment. Go ahead, book of Mark, chapter 14. It's in all the Gospels. They're all catching different angles of this bizarro event that made everyone in the room super uncomfortable, right? Nobody felt good about this because it was this great party, and all of a sudden becomes this weird, morose thing with a girl standing behind Jesus, sobbing. It was a party scene. They had the disco ball and everything going, right? They were playing oldies, right? Tony likes all these illustrations. And then what happens? You know how they laid down there for to eat? They all laid sideways. And then you lay like someone's head is here, and then somebody's head is here. You all lay sideways, and then you kind of feed the person that's resting on your bosom. Kind of interesting. And then the feet were sticking out. And you're going to see in this story, when you go and you want to go back and do the chapters on this, Mary standing behind the feet of Jesus while John is resting on the bosom of Jesus. And all of a sudden, his feet are hot, wet with what? Salt water. Tears squirting. All of a sudden, the sound of crashing and the smell of the most costly perfume there is. Then does she go and get a towel to wipe them clean? The very place she came from, called hair braider, she lets that hair down. Her tower has been crushed and crumbled. The walls came down like Jericho. Now she's using her glory, that's what your hair represents, to do what? To wash and dry his feet. And the entire room becomes intensely uncomfortable. She definitely ruined the decorum of a great party. So they turned off the shy lights, stopped the disco ball, Drifter's no longer playing, and now everyone's uncomfortable. So go ahead and Mark chapter 14, verses 3 and 4.
Go ahead.
And being in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came having an alabaster flask of very costly oil of spikenard. Then she broke the flask and put it on his head. But there were some who were indignant among themselves and said, "Why was this fragrant oil wasted?"
Why was this wasted, right? So Simon was a leper, and it says there that this costly box that she broke, she poured it on his head, and some were very indignant, going, "What is this? What a waste." What do you think that alabaster box represented, if you want to look at it spiritually speaking? Did Christ not crush himself? Wasn't he the expensive gift? What a waste, said a bunch of angels. They're not going to receive it. They're not going to know the value of this. They're not going to see Jesus for what he really is. What a waste. What a waste. Why this waste? Not seeing the value. Luke chapter 7. This is still the same story. We're going through all of it. We're going to go through all the Gospels here, and we're going to see what's going on here from all four angles of the four faces that surround the throne, giving a testimony to this amazing story of the Gospel. Luke chapter 7, verses 37 and 38. Luke 7.
37, 38.
Yeah, 37 and 38. We could wait for you, Rachel. Go ahead. Yeah, new Bible. This is good, though. Go ahead.
And behold, a woman in the city who was a sinner. When she knew that Jesus was at the table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of fragrant oil, and stood at his feet behind him weeping.
See, she's standing at his feet behind him. That's that sitting position. Go ahead.
And she began to wash his feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hair of her head. And she kissed his feet.
Whoa, kissing his feet. Now, I forgot about that part. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Anointed his head. And anointed, right, them with ointment. Verse 46, page.
What is it?
Yeah.
You did not anoint my head with oil, but this woman has anointed my feet with fragrant oil.
Preparing him for his burials, you're going to see here in a sec. So what's going on here? Why is she, you know what, it's interesting, the Greek word for kissing his feet, it's in the plural. It's only used a couple times in the entire scripture. Multiple kissing made the whole room uncomfortable. Well, this is a little too intimate. This woman is letting her hair down. Told you, she's a hooker. She's a hoe. And she is letting her hair down and making us all uncomfortable with her inappropriate touching and kissing in front of everyone. She's a sinner. Look at her. Look at what she's doing. Totally not respecting the decorum of this room. And Jesus saying, you guys have no idea what's going on here, do you? You have no idea what's going on. And the fascinating thing, when's the other time that this multiple kissing thing, you're going to see here, Judas rebukes her for kissing him multiple times and breaking open the alabaster box. It was Judas that said, this could have been sold and given to the poor. That thief, that hypocrite, who was stealing from the bag, buying himself donuts and whatever he wanted on the side. Well, guess what? It's interesting here. This multiple kissing, in which was so offensive to Judas that it was this night, as you go back and reread these sections of the gospel, that he decided to sell out Jesus. This was enough for Judas. Jesus obviously doesn't know what he's doing in his leadership. He's letting this whole girl make us all uncomfortable at this wonderful dinner party. We were just about to make friends with a Pharisee. We just won a Pharisee. We finally got some leadership. We got somebody from the very strict party to be on our side, and now it's ruined because Jesus does not know how to be at a party. He ruins every party he goes to. You notice that about Jesus? He
Except
just,
one, the wedding.
well, yeah, right. They love that. Why? Wine. So here we go. He's ruining the dinner party, letting this girl take over this whole thing and making everyone uncomfortable. What's so fascinating about this thing here is that Judas kissed him, and it's the word multiple kisses. It's not one kiss. It's the same exact kissing that disgusted him about Mary is the kind of kissing that he was doing in the garden when he's betraying Jesus. And Jesus says, are you literally betraying me with the same kisses that you were looking down at Mary with? Really? So you're going to show all this love and affection for me while you're betraying me. But when somebody who was preparing my body for death, you were criticizing. Wow. Check your heart, son. Right?
This was the kiss of death.
Yeah, it wasn't a kiss. It was kisses. Kissing, slobbering all over Jesus. We tend to watch the movies that say one peck on the cheek. No, he was slobbering all over Jesus, like Mary was. Say, oh, you like this, Jesus? You liked it when Mary did it. Jesus says, you're sick. You're a sick man. Go ahead. John chapter 11, verse 2. Hypocrite. They're going to do the very thing that they criticized everyone else for. Right? Crazy.
Kind of what's going on right now.
The times in which we live. John chapter 11, verse 2.
It was that Mary who anointed the Lord with fragrant oil and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick.
Just to kind of identify her. Now go to chapter 12, verse 3.
Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil.
And verse 5. And this is Judas talking.
Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?
See? So I'm just laying out the whole picture here. This myrrh had a bizarre effect that started revealing the hearts of everyone in that room. If you go back to Luke chapter 7, Jesus gives a parable and reveals to Simon the leper, I know your secret. You should have been washing my feet. You should have been the one that was so forgiven that your love should have exceeded Mary's love. Because you would have been forgiven more, and the more you were forgiven, the more you would have loved me. Why is the book of Luke different than all the other? Because a lot of scholars say, well, Luke is a different Mary, and she's doing the same thing in a different dinner. Like, no, it's the same Mary. You know why Luke is different than the other tellings? Different in like, because he brings up the parable and stuff. Because Luke wasn't there. Luke was a companion of Paul the Apostle, and Luke went back after Paul, I think, was killed, goes back and interviews everyone. It says it in Luke chapter 1. And all through the telling of the book of Luke, this story, it's Simon saying, this was in my heart. It says, in Simon's heart, in Simon's heart. You think Luke knew that? You think he was a mind reader? Who was Luke interviewing? Simon. Simon was telling the story of how Jesus outed him without outing him. He told a parable, exposed my heart, and I realized that the healing of leprosy wasn't complete. I still had a leprous what? Soul, my heart. Jesus called me out with a parable and didn't even shame me in front of that room. And what I did to that girl was unconscionable. So Jesus got two birds with one stone. He got the violated and the violator. Forgiveness for both. God help us, right? All right. So with that in mind, I'm going to take you through a little bit of Song of Solomon, kind of go into the last points of our teaching. We could get a little further into it, but I want you to understand the myrrh is a big part. Song of Solomon is right. If you get into the Song of Solomon, it's like right back. Yeah, it's by the book of Isaiah. Yeah, Ecclesiastes. Here you go. Song of Solomon. So what is the Song of Solomon? It's a song of songs. And the same author wrote the book of Ecclesiastes, which is the vanity of vanities. Everything in this life under the sun that we think is worth everything. Getting riches. Hey, I hang out with Elon Musk. I went up in his rocket with him. Hey, I went to the best dinner parties in the world. And we know what happened to those kind of people. They all hang out with people like Jeffrey Epstein, etc. Like it's some great thing to be amongst the elite crowd. As if your plate of food's going to taste better. It's not. Vanity of vanity. Man, you chase all this stuff. You think, I need money. I need fame. I need validation. And does it really pay off like you thought it would? Solomon, who had it all, was a king. It says that there was so much gold in Israel that they never even counted the silver. The silver meant nothing. You know that? It said that. Yeah. So silver to him was nothing. Like you can have all the silver in the world. It says, well, what's the value of that in the market of Solomon? Nothing. Pave streets with it. It doesn't matter. But gold, in fact, that's where you get the idea of 666 in the book of Revelation. It says that Solomon taxed his people 666 talents of gold. Wow. And a talent is the weight of a man. It's the number of a man. Solomon was in a position to be amongst the world elite. The richest man, had the best diplomacy. If you saw his garden, it said it had apes and peacocks and everything in it. He had his own personal zoo in his yard. He walked out there and it looked like, Disneyland. It was amazing. And it said that what's interesting about Solomon is that he says that this is all vanity. I had 1,000 wives. That's pretty intense. 300 wives and 700 concubines. I mean, some men would think, wow, this is the greatest life ever. But it ruined him, destroyed him, completely turned him into an idolater. Some authors say that turned him into an effeminate. Became very feminine, dyed his hair blue, had skinny jeans and everything. His name was no longer Solomon, it was Solomon. So, Solomon completely understands what vanity is. He says, hey, you can save all the money you want. Someone's going to squander it. They're going to steal it from you. Whatever. He goes through. And then he says, but if you want the Song of Songs, you want the real stuff. And so he brings up this relationship with this girl who's a Shunammite, and says it's that covenant you have with God where you are bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. You are atoned for. You are in this intimate, loving relationship with him. Compare that to the vanity of vanities. Well, this is the Song of Songs. And all through the Song of Songs, you're going to see, is this myrrh? Is this deep, deep relationship where you get to be completely authentic with some of the most darkest, bitter parts of your soul. A lot of people's lives are ruined because of early trauma in their life. You guys know that? You guys know that things happen early in your life that set you on your course of self-destruction? How can you deny this? That's why Satan makes sure that he afflicts you early in life, traumatizes you, and then you are spending the rest of your life playing out this trauma. Re-traumatizing yourself, traumatizing others, right? Hurting people, hurt people. So Satan knows this very well. So you have to give these things like Mary did, these deep things that you don't even want to face yourself. You'd rather forget about it. And then you bring this into the very intimate chambers with God, into the very place where it happened. Look at Mary. She had to revisit the very house itself, right? She had to go to Bethany, go in the living room, probably sitting in the very spot that it probably all started. I wouldn't be surprised one bit. And she was so re-traumatized. If you go back and reread, it says that she was weeping, sobbing uncontrollably. And everyone says, this is weird. What is going on? What mysterious catharsis? What does that mean, catharsis? Kind of purging out all this stuff is going on. This is super uncomfortable. This is not the time. When do we go back to doing the electric slide and the funky chicken? It's not going to happen tonight, folks. This is one deep moment we're having here. And so what you're going to see here is that he says, let's get away from the vanity of vanities and the hilarity of things and the foolery of things and the chasing of things and the let's drink and be merry and all this avoidance and all this kind of masking our pain. And let's get down to the deeper things. And you're going to see in the Song of Solomon where she even comes to terms with her own insecurities. She even denies him when he's knocking at the door. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. That isn't from the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation copied that from the Song of Solomon, where he tells this woman, I know it's painful. I know you're insecure, but come and face me. And let's deal with the difficult things. It's Jesus acting like a therapist. Oh, David, now you're bringing all your worldly therapy stuff into it. No, I'm bringing the Hebrew into it. Because it says that his hair, and we're not going to go to the text, we're going to go to some other text, but it says that his hair was wet with dew when he went and knocked on her door. He beheld and said, why is his hair wet with dew? It's early morning. It's about 3:34 in the morning, right? That's where all the dew is coming. And so he's coming before the dawn. And if you want to get into why Jesus' healing ministry, the word for he healed is the word therapos in Greek. And the word therapos, where you get like thermometer, theros, is from fire. And it is a servant who gets up about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, builds a fire, warms up the house so nobody has to wake up in the cold. You can just come out with your onesie and your bunny slippers and you're just fine. This is what Jesus does. He allows us to come into the light and out of the cold to deal with some things that we don't want to deal with. And so he's knocking at the door, and it says that his hair was wet with dew. She says, I don't want to come out of my bed. I'm comfortable and warm here. And he says, I know. You got to come to the door. We've got to sit down and deal with some stuff. That was Mary. She's a Shulamite. And this is what we give to God. So, Song of Solomon, Solomon himself says, well, guess what? I'd rather be in mourning and in sorrow and dealing with this stuff than be spending my life avoiding these things. And then Christ comes in the clouds of glory and I am not prepared. I'm not prepared. Does that make sense? All right, go ahead. Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verses 2 through 8. We'll kind of wrap up our study. We'll talk on the Song of Solomon a little bit, and then I want to touch on a couple things, and then we'll wrap up the study. Song of Solomon, chapter 5. By the way, this is the chapter where they become one. She finally lets him in, and they become of one flesh. Chapter 4, verse 16 and 17. And then chapter 5, verse 1. That's the center. That's the beating heart of the Song of Solomon, is their wedding night, where she opens up to him, lets him into her garden, so to speak. And they become as one. And then now she becomes insecure. Is that weird? Soon as you let God in, you become insecure. Soon as you open up your issues to God, all of your insecurities come out. That's what happened to her. Is that interesting? Let's go to it. Chapter 5, verses 2 through 8. Who wants to read it?
I sleep, but my heart is awake. It is the voice of my beloved. He knocks, saying, Open for me, my sister, my love, my dove, my perfect one. For my head is covered with dew, my walks with the drops of the night. I have taken off my robe. How can I put on again? I have washed my feet. How can I defile them? My beloved puts his hand by the latch of the door, and my heart yearns for him. I arose to open for my beloved, and my hand shook with myrrh, my fingers with liquid myrrh, on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my beloved had turned away and was gone. My heart leapt up when he spoke. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. The watchmen who went about the city found me. They struck me, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls took my veil away from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him I am lovesick.
Wow, that's heavy, huh? What's some of the insights that's there? It says it right here, right? The locks of the drops are wet from the night. He was out there laboring all night. For what, my soul? Planting the manna so I can eat? He's working in the night. He's dealing with the shadow issues of my soul. What's fascinating here is that how can I take off my robes? I've covered myself in my own what? Our own garments. And what does that mean symbolically? What does that mean to cover yourself in your own garments? I found a way to kind of clothe myself. You know, costume, right? Like an actor, they put on a costume, they become that person, right? I put on my fancy clothes, I am that person. Yeah, and you kind of use yourself as an avatar. So what do? You go out and you have an image. You go out and present yourself a certain way and you say, if I could keep this image up, I am that person, right? People kind of believe all that stuff. They think, well, I mean, if I could just lie to myself enough, I'll actually become that. How many actors do nothing but that, and then they are terrified that one day they're going to be found out because they realize that they are a phony? How insecure are actors by nature? Yeah, super insecure. In fact, they're kind of psychotically insecure. I actually knew some actors. They are actually psychotically insecure. So the costumes don't work. Fig leaf garments, strangely, don't work. You still know you're naked even when you're wearing them, right?
I think actors and actresses, they do that because they have a lot of fear of their own self. So now they could be somebody else.
Yeah, they could put on their monster costume or their Superman costume or their Iron Man or whatever they're putting on. And I am that. I could fly this airplane because I played one in a movie, right? A pilot, this type of thing. I played a doctor. I could do this operation.
They're good at hiding their insecurities.
Yeah, but it doesn't work in the end, does it? And that is what it's saying. She's saying, how can I just put my garments on? Now you're telling me to disrobe and get authentic and naked with you? When in the middle of the night, open up the door to a therapy session when I have found a way to manage this whole thing? Does God need to get down to those bitter parts of your life? Does he need to get down to that stuff? Guess what? Whether or not you know it, and you'll see it later on, we might touch on this in the study. You don't know why you're a nightmare to other people. This is why. You have a seething poison down there, and it's not dealt with. God has got to lance that boil and deal with this stuff. It's gross when it comes out, trust me. So Christ is very good at this. Anyway, it's very fascinating. But what does he do? He leaves myrrh at the latchet of the door. What's the door? What's a door handle? It's access to. Yeah, it's access. So what does he do? He puts the myrrh down there, which is a picture of what? Dedication, devotion. But mourning, sad that you didn't answer. But he still is saying, that's the answer right there, is that door handle. I'm knocking, but let me in. I'm not going to come in as the popo kicking this thing down like I'm SWAT.
You have to let him in.
Yeah, he's not coming in like a no-knock warrant. Right, Mike?
Mhm.
Yeah. So anyway, this is this kind of important thing to understand, is that the key is the myrrh on that door latchet. You're going to have to deal with some very painful stuff, but open up. Don't live according to what's convenient for you, your bed, your garments, the very fact that you've washed yourself. No, I need to wash you. That was something that Peter had a hard time with. Remember, Jesus wanted to wash his feet. What did Peter say?
That's right here.
Well, before that, what did he say? Don't wash my feet. Yeah, don't do that to me. That's too humiliating. What do you think? I need my feet washed? No, please. No, Christ is like, no, if you don't let me wash your feet, what does he say? You have no part with me. You have to let me wash your feet. You have to let me be your therapist. You have to let me be your servant. You have to let me deal with the stuff that you don't want to deal with. And if you don't, you're going to be considered none of mine. Because the people that are going to be in my kingdom are the people that they open the door, they let me in. How am I, as a great physician, going to heal you unless you let me heal you and do some work in your soul? You think living as a hypocrite is going to pay off in the end? Putting on your robes and strutting around and act like you're the most, I'm holier than thou, that the book of Isaiah talks about, does not work, does it? No way. No way.
So is that why later on he said, wash my hair, my feet, and everything else? Because
Yeah, he says, I'm a super filthy man. Look at me. And what does Peter do? Classic Peter. He's a pendulum. He's obviously bipolar. Right? Just goes from one to the next. And it's interesting. It's too bad I'm probably not going to be able to get to one part of the study I really want to get to, but we'll see. Because it's the part of where Peter denies Jesus and why he had the quote, the rooster crow. It's an interesting to do a word study on crow and rooster. Oh man, it's a great word study. But anyway, so let's go to the book of, because the other word for myrrh, real quick, is another word for myrrh. And it's the word to spread something about, to cover something, right? And that's actually the word for myrrh. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to the Song of Psalms. It's the word lute. But let's look at Psalms 45, verse 8. It's this picture of, we're going to go back to the Song of Solomon, but I want you to see that this is how you are married to him. This is how you're his wife. This is how you become his companion. This is how you become his Shulamite. Is you have to let him to minister and cover you with this garment of myrrh. Oh, Psalms, the book of Psalms.
45.
And go to chapter 45. And if you read all of chapter 45, do you know what you would see? You would see almost, it sounds like the Song of Solomon. The whole chapter is a picture, and people believe that this is the story of the Song of Solomon. But let's just read verse 8. Wait, 45. Yeah, here, go this way a little bit. Well, let's let Mike get to it, which is fine. We should take the time. Well, I'm sorry.
45?
Yeah, 45. Where am I?
In the 20s. 30s.
I wish I was in my 20s.
Yeah, me too.
All right. Where am I now? Is that 30, 41? All right,
I'd
hold on.
like to be in my 20s.
Yeah, if I knew what I knew now.
Page 811.
Was this 40?
49,
Here we go. 45, verse 8. What?
46. Some more.
That's all right. That's all right. Here, help me there.
We're getting there.
All right, there we go. Verse 8. There we go. Verse 8 right there. Go ahead.
All right. All your garments are scented with myrrh and aloes and cassia, out of the ivory palaces by which they have made you glad.
It's the idea of covering you, slathering you with something. And believe it or not, the idea of myrrh also means to spread something over you and make you sticky. How in the world is this? What illustration is spreading something on you, making you sticky? That sounds gross, right? But the idea is that God is trying to cover you. And I'm going to say this in a stupid way, but it's going to make sense once I keep going on. It's pretty sticky. It's a sticky issue to deal with myrrh. You know, when you're dealing with things that you don't want to deal with, that's deep in your soul, it's a sticky substance. And there's a tendency for things to stick to you. We are spending too much time trying to make things not stick. Oh, no, that's not me. Oh, you must be talking about another David Leon. No, I'm talking about you. And myrrh has a way of, whenever God talks to you, everything sticks. But he says, but this is going to be your garment. I'm going to ironically cover you by your ability to be honest with me, to come to terms with me, and to confess. And if you have a garment of myrrh, nothing can touch you. I don't care how many accusations Satan comes with. You've already done business with who? With your advocate, with your husband, with me. So our biggest fear is that something would stick to us, huh? I don't want to deal with it. No, hey, denial and everything. We use a lot of denial. But God says, no, I'm going to cover you with myrrh. The word lut means sticky. You're going to be someone that can own these things. And when I talk to you, it's going to stick. You're going to remember this. It's going to be something that really gets attached to your soul. And it's going to cover you. But that myrrh is sweet smelling to me. Mary's ability to get down to her stuff in Bethany was a sweet smell to Jesus instead of Simon's denial and avoidance, right? That smelled putrid. That was a putrid smell. Oh, that's what we need, Simon. I'm in your house. You violated her. And now denial, that's what you're going to bring. Avoidance. Not very awesome to God. But Mary was getting down to the sticky, deep stuff. Ooh, right? All right, let's go back to the Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 13. It's going to be kind of a quick move through the Song of Solomon just to give you how much Song of Solomon is obsessed with this Smyrna, this myrrh, this deep sense of bonding to your husband. And that's your preparation for your death. Get close to Jesus. Bond with him. Chapter 1, verse 13, back to the, it's actually right here, which is good. It's actually going to be chapter 1, verse 13. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. A bundle of myrrh is my beloved to me that lies all night between my breasts.
So they actually had a bundle of myrrh. We talked about this last time where it's in a leather pouch. And how do you get the scent of that myrrh out? Remember that? To twist it until you hear the cracking. Wow. It's a picture of him lying his head on her bosom. And so it's this idea of, wow, I'm going to let this myrrh lie all night between my bosom. And it's the idea of where Jesus rests his head. Isn't it interesting how he pledges his head to that place where the myrrh is, where your pain is, where the part you're trying to of the bitter, myrrh was bitter, right? And it says that that's where my head rests all night. Does he obsess himself with your problems when you give them to him? Myrrh. Does he lay all night there? The thing that is bothering you in your breastplate? He lies all night there, twisted over it. Does this make sense? Yeah. Song of Solomon, chapter 3, verse 6. This is good study, huh?
Yeah.
We need this. We need to really trust Jesus with things that we're really kind of running and avoiding. So how do we have victory? What is victory? We think victory is, well, I deny these things and I look good to everybody else and I present myself. God says that's not what victory looks like. It looks like myrrh. You get broken, you trust him, and you're covered with it. Look at chapter 3, verse 6. It's talking about the woman, whoever wants to read it.
Who is this coming out of the wilderness?
It's in just the next page. Well, hold on. So it's verse 6 right here. Yeah, he's got it.
Who is this coming out of the wilderness, like pillars of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the merchants' fragrance powders?
And it's looking at this victorious woman coming out of the wilderness, and she's majestic. Wow. Remember Isaiah's wedding? We kind of used this whole illustration. God sees us being victorious when we're covered in the smell of myrrh. We've done business with God. We've gotten open and got down to these very hard things. And it says, this is how you come out of the wilderness, which is this world, you guys. This world is called a wilderness in the Bible. And you're just traveling through a wilderness. Don't get caught up in all the oasis mirages that's out there. It's all a lie. It's all going to be burned up as pitch is burned up. So her victory is really with these pillars of myrrh. Ascending prayers, God, honest, authentic prayer communion with God. When God shows you things about you, you open your heart and you mingle these things with God. Ironically, this is how you become his wife. The bride of Christ, the very thing that God says, this is how you prepare yourself for my coming. You become a wife to me, and we get into the myrrh. Let's go to Song of Solomon chapter 4, verse 6. Next chapter, here's chapter 4, verse 6 right here. Whoever wants to read that.
Until the day breaks and the shadows flee away, I will go my way to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of frankincense.
Mountain of myrrh. Man, sometimes we need mountains of myrrh. Not a little speck of myrrh. We have to deal with mountains of this stuff sometimes, right? Deep stuff. Deep stuff. Traumatizing, re-traumatizing, a whole life of what? Just cathartically, weirdly participating in this stuff where you become ruined as a person. And sometimes the work feels like, quote, until the day breaks and shadows flee away, I will get me to the mountain of myrrh. Wow. That's a hard night. When it seems like God is taking you through a mountain of stuff, right? And to the hill of frankincense. Look at verse 14. Same chapter, just verse 14.
Spikenard and saffron,
Calamus,
calamus and cinnamon, with all trees of frankincense, myrrh, and aloes, with all the chief spices.
This is the chief spices, you guys. This is, when you get into, I don't want to break it down because I love getting to the study of all this stuff, but even the word calamus, you know what's the word? It's the word kafar. What's the word kafar, Zach? Yom kafar.
Cover.
Yeah, I think so. Yom Kippur. Yeah, to cover, right? In other words, this is how God covers you. This is how you are covered. It's the picture of like how he covered the ark with kafar. Remember that the Noah's ark? It was covered with a black sticky substance, kafar. Man, it's tough, man, to really do business with God. But this is how you're going to survive the wrath of God. This is how you're going to survive when God says, did you know there's only 8 people came out of my wrath that one time? And Noah was a preacher of righteousness. Did you know the ark was a picture of hiding, abiding, and residing in a place in which God is saying there's no judgment there? Do you know why? It's covered in kafar. That sticky black substance.
That's what he put on you.
Yeah.
Keep it from
It's like a tar stuff, huh?
Asphalt, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Exactly what it is.
Emotion.
And God is just saying, just let that be your garment. Yeah, it's a garment of mourning, a garment of grief, but it's a covering. Is this fascinating?
Yeah.
Chapter 5, verse 1. We're going back to the Song of Solomon. We're staying there. Just chapter 5, verse 1. Remember, this is the wedding night, and this is what makes Jesus happy. Go ahead, Rachel, if you want to read verse 1.
I have come to my garden, my sister, my spouse. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb with my honey. I have drunk my wine with my milk. To his friends, eat, O friends, drink, yes, drink deeply.
And the word there was be intoxicated. Go deep with God on this stuff until you realize he's your lover. He's your friend. He is your advocate. He's the one you should be running to. He's the one you should open up this part of your soul to, not to these animals, not to these exploiters, It's interesting how we open our soul to people that have proven themselves to be predatory. You've noticed that? Anybody? To the wrong people. The people that look upon our vulnerabilities, and what do they think? Yum, lamb chops. Time to go to work. Right? And these are the people we open up to. God says, why don't you open up to me? This is beautiful to me. My sister, my spouse, I've gathered the myrrh with my spice. I have everything you give to him, he adds his own. You'll notice that. That is atonement. Right here is the day that they become one. He always adds whatever you bring to him, he sweetens it. Whatever you bring forth to him, he adds his qualities to it and makes it beautiful. Does that sound interesting? So back to this loot, myrrh, to wrap or to swaddle something tightly. Is that interesting? Sound like Jesus is a baby? To make sticky, etc. It means to cast a covering over people. What I'm going to do is, man, there's so much. I'm going to have to skip over some stuff here because let's just at least go to 1 Samuel chapter 21, verse 9. I want you to see if you can find the word myrrh there. It's very interesting. 1 Samuel 2:9. See if you can find the word myrrh. Yeah, Samuel. That's a tough one. That's back in these. There you have 2 Kings. Before that, you have 1 Samuel. Then comes
Ruth
2.
and then 2 Samuel.
Here's 1 Samuel. So go to 2 Samuel. There you go. Yeah, it's good. These tabs are helpful, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
2 Samuel chapter, what did I say? Chapter 21. Go to chapter 21 and go to verse 9. Samuel chapter 21.
Samuel 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. First, yes. I made a mistake. Did I say 2 Samuel? 1 Samuel. Please forgive me. 1 Samuel. My mistake. Yeah, go back. Here's first again.
Chapter 21?
Yeah, chapter 21. 1 Samuel 21, verse 9. And I want you to see the word myrrh, believe it or not, because I was going to give you a bunch of verses that show myrrh, 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 and say it's the same word, but just for time's sake, you know. I want you to see what the word myrrh is, because you're going to see it when it's translated as something different, but it's the same word in Hebrew. You're thinking, well, why they translate it different? Why didn't they just put the word myrrh there? Because myrrh is a word in the language is always talking about its function, the function of something. So you're trying to see what myrrh is for. And so look at chapter 1 Samuel 21, verse 9, whoever wants to read that. Go ahead, Paige.
So the priest said, the sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you killed in the valley of Elah. There it is, wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. I said it right.
Yeah, ephod.
If you will take that, take it, for there is no other except that one here.
Wrapped in a cloth. That's the word myrrh. Is that interesting? God wraps you when you are what? Wounded. When your sores are open. When your soul is naked, vulnerable. His impulse, his instinct is to do what? To wrap you up. Does that make sense? Isaiah chapter 25, verse 7. I won't give you any clues. I want you to find the word myrrh in there. Interesting, huh? So it's the book of Isaiah, which is like the prophets in the back, yeah, of the Old Testament. After Proverbs.
It's right after Song of Solomon.
Yeah, I think you pretty much were there. Yeah, right here. There's going to be Psalms, Proverbs. Here's Isaiah right here. It's right after Song of Solomon is Isaiah. So Isaiah chapter 25. And again, it's ironic that God says the only way I'm going to be able to cover you is you have to come open, oozing, confessing of the sores of your soul.
Chapter 25, what verse?
Chapter 25, verse 7. Whoever wants to read that. Go ahead, Paige.
And he will destroy on this mountain the surface of the covering, cast over all people, and the veil that is spread over all nations.
Where's the word myrrh there?
The veil that is spread.
You're right. covering cast over the people, and veil that is spreading over all. It's the word myrrh. Wow. Covering the people and putting a veil over all is the word myrrh. Ironically, Satan can't touch you if you humble yourself, submit to God, and be authentic before him. God's instinct is to protect you. Look at what happened to Mary. What did he say when they were criticizing her in that house? Leave her alone. He's a defender. If you're in that naked place, which is called the laver, the place in which God's asking you to open up, it's a wash bin that was at the sanctuary. And he's saying, okay, take off your shoes, take off your stuff. You're going to have to get a little naked right now. That's how you prepare, because that's the place you go before you enter the temple. So if you want to enter into the presence of God, the last stop is this place where you have to get naked and then deal with all this stuff and be washed. It was called a looking glass, a mirror, right? We talked about that last night. So that's, and we'll kind of wrap up the study, but I want to touch on, that's when the book of Revelation says the gospel is sweet in the mouth, but it is what? Bitter in the belly. Man, these are some tough cups to drink sometimes. Man, I always like it when God says, okay, it's a wrap. Don't worry about it. And to go skipping along saying, I'm a Christian. I don't have to. But you drove all the way out to Saline to say, hey, I want to make things right. Yeah, it's sweet in the mouth, but it requires this deeper follow through stuff. Does that make sense, you guys? And you will see when you get a little further into these kind of studies that God requires this of you before you go out and preach the gospel. Did you know that? He bitters you. He gets you down to these things. He says, don't even go out and teach my word until you go through this. Like Jonah did. Like Peter did. It says that he wept what? After he denied Christ, he went out and wept bitterly. The word myrrh. It's bitter. He had to come down to some things. Why? Because before Jesus says, hey, listen, you guys, there's going to be one guy who's going to betray me. That was revealed at one foot wash. Now we're at another foot wash, back at the place where the laver is. One of you guys is going to betray me, and one of you guys is going to deny me. Peter's like, hey, everyone else would deny you, but I'm the last person in this room that would deny you, right? Did Peter know his heart very well? I don't think so. It says that Peter absolutely esteemed himself way higher than what God, but what was Jesus's response to him?
Step behind me, Satan.
No, that was before. That was after that. What does anyone know what happened that event? Zach? No?
You mean with the...
What happened in the foot wash, the second foot wash, that was 6 days later, where Jesus is now washing feet.
Tell him to wash his hair.
After all that, but Jesus says, one of you guys are not just going to betray me, but somebody's going to even deny me. And Peter says, everyone else would deny you but me. And Jesus turns to Peter and says, you're the guy. And he says, in fact, before the rooster crows twice, you're going to deny me 3 times. Very fascinating, huh? And Peter says, are you serious? But Jesus says, I've prayed for you, though. And when you are converted, I'll give you the notes because I'm not going to take you guys through all the verses. When you're converted, after you weep bitterly and you come to yourself, I'm going to say, go feed my sheep. I'm going to say, Peter, go feed my lambs. Now you could go and start talking about me. But until then, don't talk about me to other people. You sound like a sounding brass, a tinkling cymbal, blah, blah, blah. Right? And it says, Satan has desired, this is Luke chapter 22, has desired to sift you out and to make you a hypocrite. You're going to start sounding like these other Pharisees. And you're going to be using my name to do it. What's interesting is when Peter, it's very fast. If you want, just real quick, go to John chapter 18. Because Luke 22 is really the insight into all of this. Because what you're going to see here is that, when Jesus was betrayed, you want to hear something interesting? You're going to see here that, chapter 18. You're going to see that Jesus, when he was taken into custody, right? By the Jerusalem Police Department, chapter 18.
Is he or not?
Well, yeah, he did that. Remember, Peter went to the defense and all this other kind of stuff. But what happens is that once they started taking Jesus and taking him into custody, it said what's interesting is that Peter followed him at a distance. He didn't want to be too closely associated to Jesus because there was trouble. You're going to see it's going to be the beginning of the fall of Peter. I don't want to be too close to this, right? Anyway,
Isn't that what somebody asked him? Didn't I see you with?
we're getting there. Trust me, we're getting there. Go ahead. So he's in the court. John chapter 18, verses 25 and 26 says this. Whoever wants to read it.
Now Simon Peter stood and warmed himself. Therefore they said to him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the servants of the high priest, a relative of him, whose ear Peter cut off, said, "Did I not see you in the garden?"
And you're going to see, we're going to go to Luke 22 here in a sec, because I want you to see the rest. There's a bunch of people that eyeballed Peter. It's not just the little girl, the damsel that they said. It's a guy who is a relative of Matthias that his ear was cut off. And a bunch of people are saying, wait a minute, you're the guy, you're the guy. And Peter's like, whoa, wait a minute. And he gets overwhelmed. He gets overwhelmed by this. Go to Luke chapter 22, verse 54. Check this out, you guys. He's there for an hour, it says. For a whole hour, he's dealing with people coming up saying, weren't you in the garden? Wait a minute, weren't you the guy? And he's literally losing it. Luke 22, verse 54 and 55. Now I give him a little more time. And this is very powerful because what we're going to see here is that Peter comes to a very difficult place with himself at some point. It's a friend of the guy who's a relative, who's the guy whose ear he cut off. Luke 22. And then look at verse 54 and 55. Whoever wants to read it. Go ahead, Paige.
Having arrested him, they led him and brought him into the high priest's house, but Peter followed at a distance.
Ooh, not a good plan. Go ahead.
Now when they had kindled a fire in the midst of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them.
Go ahead, verse 56.
And a certain servant girl,
Now a girl shows up. Go ahead.
Seeing him as he sat by the fire, looked intently at him and said, "This man was also with him."
Go ahead, keep reading.
But he denied him, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." And after a little while, another saw him and said,
Now we got another one.
"Of them."
We got 3 people now coming at Peter. Go ahead.
But Peter said, "Man, I am not." And after about an hour had passed, another confidently affirmed, saying, "Surely this fellow also was with him, for he is a
Galilean. So, yeah, even his language is, this guy's one of his. And Peter followed at a distance. And it said when he went to the courtyard, he came there to warm himself. It's real interesting how we kind of have these little mitigating things with God. As long as I'm not too close and as long as I can keep myself warm. And all of a sudden, he's being exposed and he doesn't want to deal with it. I'm going to read like Mark chapter 14, verses 67, 69. If you want to go to, but it's Mark 14. It says, and when she saw Peter warming himself, she looked upon him and said, weren't you with Jesus of Nazareth? And verse 69 says, and the maid saw him again and began to say to them who stood by, this guy's one of them. Man, the whole group was outing Peter. There was no getting out of this. Jesus had designated this whole thing. If you go back to chapter Luke 22, stay there, read verses 60 to 62.
But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are saying." Immediately while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." So Peter went out and wept bitterly.
Ah, the myrrh. Now we're getting down to it. And this is a whole nother study we'll do some other time. But it says he was warming himself by what? A coal fire. And the word coal fire is only used these couple of times. It's when Peter denied Christ and when Jesus built another fire on the beach and built a coal fire. And the word coal is a word that you've actually used before in Greek. You guys spoke Greek. You didn't know. If you've ever used the word anthrax, that's the word. It means to burn down to the bones, down to the marrow, anthrax. To gut down to the deepest, most root and burn, to eat away at something. And so Jesus was getting down to the coals of Peter, saying, man, we got to get down to your bones, bro, because you are in denial. You're estimating yourself way up here. And reality is, you're like everyone else. See, the problem is we set ourselves up for this because we follow at a distance, we warm ourselves, and what's so sad is we estimate ourselves way higher than what we really are. And we're setting ourselves up. Pride goes before what? Fall. The Bible says. Estimate yourself in a low, humble way, and believe it or not, you're going to stay in a good place. Real quick, this is how we're going to wrap up the study. It's very fascinating, the study, huh? Can I tell you what the word in Greek for rooster is? It means to ward off. Go and look it up. It's interesting. To ward off. But the word like to crow, he crowed. Are you ready for this? You're going to know this word. You're going to say, no way, David. This is the word in Greek. Here's another Greek word that you guys know. You ready? Phony.
I was kind of expecting
Sound like
that.
cock-a-doodle doo.
Yeah. Back. Phony.
Phony, yeah.
That's crow.
That's the word to crow.
Oh.
Are you ready for that? So, phony or phonio, here is the breakdown of the word. This is it. This is the official breakdown of a Thayer's Greek lexicon scholarly. It's the idea to disclose something, to call out, to bid one to quit doing something, to arrest or accost somebody, to bring forth something into the light, to become evident so all can see and to view it, to appear to the mind, to bring somebody to a place of judgment as if brought by a lamp, to a place to make known their own thoughts. It's where the word phone is the word foe, where we get the word, you guys ready? Photo, right? Or the word phosphorus. To bring something to light. Have you ever tried to put out a phosphorus fire? I did in the Navy. You can't put them out. In fact, if you throw water on it, it inflames even more. Yeah, you ever heard of phosphorus fires? Water doesn't work. You have to just let that thing burn until it's done burning. And God says, that's what was happening. I let that rooster to ward you off, to bring you to yourself, to bring you to the judgment, to bring you to the light, to bring you to that place in which you are going to see something about yourself in perfect photographic. You're going to see it. You're going to see what I see. And man, it was too much for Peter. It says that, verse 62, it says that, and Peter went out and wept bitterly. What a wake-up call for Peter, huh? This is very painful. So the word phone is the word. You are now exposed as a phony. His own disciple. This is very painful. But God's not doing this because he doesn't love Peter. Did Jesus love Peter?
Yeah, he told me,
You are well loved of me.
but I still love
I love you very much, but you know what? We have got to get down to the roots of this, Peter. You are completely making proclamations about yourself in regard to the quality person that you are. But guess what? Your ideas are wrong. Remember, you're right, Tony. It was Peter that he says, get thee behind me, Satan. Why? Because this was Peter's nature. He says, Jesus, don't go to Jerusalem. They're going to kill you. Did Peter have a problem avoiding trouble? And I don't mean just trouble, avoiding anything that was against the interest of Peter. This is how we're going to have to wrap up our
it.
study.
Jesus was the opposite. He went right to.
That's the kind of therapos he is. That's the kind of Lord that we have, you guys, is that he's not afraid to go to those dark places. He's not afraid to go to these places. That's very bitter for us. It's bitter for him. We pierced him. We could go further and study some other time, or we could talk about it some other time. But it really is this picture of, it's very painful to go to these places, but he is already gone there. When you saw him up on Calvary's cross, he's already gone there. When he's talking to you about your own soul, he's gone to the places that you don't want to go to. He's already gone there because he's already been there. He knows you. You can't run from Jesus. You can't run from God. But he's not there to destroy you. Do you know who is there to destroy you? The very one who's getting you to cover yourself in denial, in costumes. Yeah. Getting you to dismiss it, getting you to avoid it, getting you to charge up your spiritual credit card at max and say, I'll deal with it later. And all of a sudden you realize, man, I mean, it's not even, I thought it was only 22%. It's 1,000,000%. I'm never getting out of this debt. Defer, defer, defer. Does that work? Putting it off, putting it off, putting it off. It doesn't work, you guys.
He says, I come quickly.
Let's just bring it closer.
Yeah, let's just deal with it. I already have the remedy. I know how to deal with it. I drank this cup for you. Why don't you just let me go to that place with you and for you? Does that make sense? That's it. That's the gospel, guys. That's why that story with Mary has to be taught everywhere, because you're never going to know God until you know that about God.
You on the way over here? You left the store. I told you that denial thing. I didn't want to be in it because for some reason, man, we got just in a little bigger thing. And I stopped it right there. I said, "Look, I don't want to be in this denial thing. I gotta go." It's just, I don't know what it was, man. I said, "That's Satan. He's trying to pull me away from this."
Yeah.
I told him, "Get out of my car, man." We were here together.
Keep doing it.
And I told her, "Look, I need you to go to this one with me, because of my brother thing, And I'm here." But he tried to pull me away. That denial thing.
It's
So
true.
that's what I told her.
Constant battle
Man,
every
it's
day.
him. He's here. He's right here in between us right now.
Man.
He's making
Yeah.
us go at each other. Let's stop it. Let's go.
That's the other thing is that, that's the spiritual world that we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
So the best thing to do in situations like that is deny Satan, but pray.
Yeah.
Say the Lord's Prayer. And what does it say at the end of the Lord's Prayer? Keep us from evil.